There are moments in history when the world feels as though it has lost its center, not because of one event, not because of one war, but because fear itself seems to ripple everywhere at once. People sense it before they can explain it. In their bodies, in their conversations, in the quiet moments when the news is turned off, but the unease remains. And when that happens, the question almost always arises: is peace even possible anymore? Not as an idea, not as a slogan, but as something real, something lived, something felt, something that does not collapse the moment the world shakes again. Nearly a century ago, during one of the most violent and uncertain periods in human history, Edgar Cayce was asked to address that exact question. Not abstractly, not politically, but spiritually and practically. What he offered was not a prediction, and it was not a promise that conflict would magically disappear. Instead, it was something far more unsettling at first and far more stabilizing once understood. Because Cayce did not begin with nations. He did not begin with leaders. He did not begin with systems. He began somewhere much closer. The year was 1942. The world was at war. Not symbolically, not psychologically, but physically, brutally, globally. Fear was not theoretical, it was lived daily. Families were separated, cities were burning, entire nations were locked in survival mode, and in the middle of that chaos, Cayce was asked to give a discourse on world peace. That alone tells us something important. People were not asking for escape. They were asking for grounding. They were not asking when peace would come. They were asking what peace actually is, and whether it could exist at all when the world itself seemed intent on destroying itself. Cayce's response did not comfort people in the way they might have expected. He did not point to treaties. He did not point to political movements. He did not point to future victories or defeats. Instead, he did something quietly radical. He removed peace from the external world and placed it squarely within the human consciousness. Peace, as the world defines it, does not last. Cayce observed something history confirms again and again. Most human efforts toward peace are built on power, control, or fear of loss. They satisfy the ideals of a few. They protect the interests of groups. They rise, and then they fracture. Why? Because peace that depends on circumstances is not peace at all. It is a pause, and pauses end. This is why Cayce warned that looking to individuals, personalities, or institutions for lasting peace will always fail. Not because those people are evil, but because no external authority can stabilize what is internally fragmented. When fear governs the inner world, the outer world will always reflect it. Here is where Cayce's message becomes challenging, and where many people instinctively pull away. He said, in essence, if peace does not exist within the individual, it cannot exist in the world. That does not mean individuals are to blame for war. It means something more subtle and more profound. It means the world is not healed by slogans, but by states of consciousness. And consciousness spreads, quietly, relentlessly, person to person. This is why Cayce spoke of fear creeping even into the hearts of the faithful. Because fear is contagious. But so is peace. One of the most striking phrases in this discourse is also one of the least understood. Cayce said that individuals are called to stand between the living and the dead. This is not a literal battlefield image. It is a psychological and spiritual one. The dead, in this sense, are not only those who have lost physical life, but those who are living without inner vitality, those who have surrendered to despair, those who have hardened into fear, those who have stopped believing that goodness matters. To stand between the living and the dead is to refuse to amplify fear. It is to become a stabilizing presence in environments that are emotionally volatile. This does not require preaching. It does not require confrontation. It requires being. A calm nervous system, a grounded presence, a refusal to participate in panic. That alone changes rooms, families, communities, and over time it changes history. Edgar Cayce made a statement that feels almost uncomfortable to hear. You cannot pray for peace while there is no peace in your own heart. This is not a rebuke. It is an observation. When fear dominates the inner landscape, even prayers become anxious. They are filled with urgency, with desperation, with the subtle demand that the world change so the inner self can finally rest. But true peace works in the opposite direction. When the inner world stabilizes, the outer world no longer feels so overwhelming. This does not mean suffering disappears. It means suffering no longer defines reality, and that distinction matters. Peace is something you radiate, not demand. One of the most gentle and powerful ideas in this reading is that peace is something you carry into encounters. Cayce described a state of being where every person you meet is quietly glad you crossed their path. Not because you fixed them, not because you convinced them, but because your presence brought relief instead of pressure, hope instead of dread, space instead of judgment. This is not idealism, this is psychology. Humans regulate one another emotionally. We entrain to each other's states. A fearful person spreads fear. A grounded person spreads calm. Multiply that effect, and you begin to see how peace actually moves through the world. Cayce reminded his audience that there is nothing new under the sun. Conflict repeats because the underlying causes repeat. Fear, greed, identity, separation. Until those are addressed at the level of consciousness, new wars will simply replace old ones. This is why Cayce did not dismiss economic inequality, racial hatred, nationalism, or religious division. But he did reframe them. He treated them not as political problems first, but as misalignments of perception. When people forget their shared humanity, systems will always reflect that forgetfulness. Economic imbalance, seen clearly. Cayce did not suggest control or coercion as solutions. He pointed instead to responsibility and conscience. The idea is simple and uncomfortable. When individuals stop seeing abundance as something to hoard, systems change. When generosity becomes instinctual rather than forced, fear loosens its grip. This is not about guilt, it is about maturity. Racial hatred and misunderstanding. Cayce addressed racial division in a way that remains relevant and quietly radical. He framed it as misunderstanding sustained by neglect, not solved by words alone, but by action, by engagement, by seeing, by refusing to let ignorance persist unchallenged. Again, not through aggression, but through presence. National identity without supremacy. Edgar Cayce acknowledged the natural human attachment to nation and culture, but he warned against elevating any identity above the principle of brotherhood. Love of one's country does not require hatred of another. When it does, fear is in control, religion as a divider, and a unifier. Perhaps the most sobering observation Cayce made was that more blood has been shed over religious differences than almost any other cause. Why? Because truth, when weaponized, becomes dangerous. Cayce did not dismiss faith, he deepened it. He pointed toward unity of spirit rather than uniformity of belief. When love is present, labels lose their power. Cayce returned again and again to a single idea. You are your brother's keeper, not in the sense of control, but in the sense of influence. Every interaction either increases fear or reduces it. Every choice either reinforces separation or dissolves it. This is not about perfection, it is about direction. The world today feels unpredictable because it is being honest about its fractures. That does not mean collapse is inevitable. It means awareness is increasing, and awareness is the beginning of responsibility. Cayce did not promise an easy world. He offered a grounded one, a world stabilized not by force, but by individuals who choose peace even when fear is available, especially when fear is available. If these reflections resonate with you, if you find value in exploring Edgar Cayce's teachings through a calm, thoughtful lens, you're invited to subscribe to this channel. Not for urgency, not for prediction, but for steadiness, for perspective, and for conversations that help make sense of uncertain times. Peace does not arrive all at once. It arrives person by person, moment by moment, choice by choice. And it begins exactly where Cayce said it does, within.